Hey, it's Romania Black. We're on episode 23 of Revolutionary Girl Utena, and I've waited like a week because of scheduling and recording other things, and I'm kind of having withdrawals. But also, I had to go back and rewatch episode 22 and take more notes with more theories, because the moment I went back and rewatched it, I was like, oh, now I have these other theories, and I feel like I need to solidify things that I said, that I was like, oh no, I need to make sure that I get across my meaning, because I think during the discussion last week, I was like theorizing and being like, well, I want to give the benefit of the doubt to the episode, but then as the episode goes on, it starts changing my views, and so here we are. So let's start out before we get into the comments that are concerning episodes 16 and 17, I believe. Maybe 18's thrown in there as well. But to talk about a few things I've noticed from the episode that I may not have cemented last week in the discussion. So the first thing I want to talk about is the green hue that was shown throughout the flashback in episode 22. I realized what it reminded me of. It reminds me of the Wizard of Oz and the Emerald City. And during the Emerald City in the Wizard of Oz, maybe I mentioned it last week, it's this idea that our characters are kind of, you know, put on the rose-tinted glasses. For Mikage, they are lavender-tinted glasses. And they're shown kind of this illusion of what this place is. But then when the curtain gets pulled back, they get to see who Oz really is. And to me, Akio is Oz. And we, the audience, have kind of seen a little glimpse behind the curtain, but our main characters have not. And that's what's so frustrating about it, right? But also, even the steps that the students were walking up as they were going into Otari Academy and to the Nemuro Memorial Hall, even those steps in the sepia tone flashback looked like they were yellow brick, so like the yellow brick road. So I feel there is like a Wizard of Oz connection there, which is fascinating to me. So yeah, so theory time. I've got some theories I want to point out before we get to these comments. This is going to be a long intro, but I want to give my overall theories and just get them out of the way now before we dive into the episode, because I've not watched the preview. I have no clue what's coming. So I do know that if we're sticking by the 3-act structure and every third of Utena is an act, then by episode 26 we'll be done with Act 2. And typically Act 2 ends where everybody's at their worst point, which I'm terrified about. So we're not there yet, though. We've got like 3 episodes. It'll be fine. So, theory time. I think, after rewatching episode 22, I think that Toga and Utena's parents were part of the board of directors. I got a major, like, Rocky Horror Picture Show vibe from last episode as well. Like, let's do the time warp again. And there's all these people that are invested in this experimentation in Rocky Horror Picture Show. Dr. Frankenfurter was trying to find this being that would live forever, and that was kind of Rocky. And then he was the perfect specimen, and they were all aliens. And I think that's the case here, but we don't know for sure. But I think Toga and Utena's parents were part of the board of directors. That's the connection between them. That's why Toga was drawn to the funeral, drawn to Utena. And I think that maybe somehow Utena's parents could have got involved in the experimentation to revolutionize the world and were victims of it. And Toga, and that's how both of them, it's tied to how both of them got the rings. Utena got the ring from the prince, so we think. Whether it's Akio or not, we don't know yet. And Toga got the rings, and Toga's been distributing the rings to everybody else that is on the student council, like Miki and Juri and Nanami, and Saionji. So, to our knowledge, we don't know for sure, but that's just my theory. So I feel like Toga and Utena's parents were part of the board of directors. They're tied to all of this, because as soon as Utena's parents died, she was probably taken in by people that are connected to the board of directors, and they send her to Otari Academy. I think it's all connected. But we'll see what ends up happening. And then the whole thing with Mikage and Takiko, and did he love her? Was it a veil? Here's what I wrote down for my theory. I think Mikage, aka Soji, aka Nemuro, has been trying to convince himself that he likes Takiko to fit into this normal heterosexual agenda. But seeing her tell Mamiya that she hates people who don't care for their well-being, he also sees her with Akio, meaning that despite what she says to Mamiya, she does have inner ulterior motives, and she's projecting her own lack of being honest with herself onto Mamiya in that in under the guise of care, right? And we talked about this last week. But then at the end of the episode, he sees Utena with Anthe, meaning that Utena saying to Anthe the same thing could also show Mikage that Utena is projecting her concern for Anthe because she loves her onto Anthe to hide the fact that she's afraid to admit that she loves a woman or is wanting to be aware of it. And it's connected to Mikage's own fear that he doesn't want to admit that he loves Mamiya. And so he's doing all this to hide that as well. I think it's all connected, right? I think that Mikage sees a lot of himself in Utena, but he has to come to terms with his own feelings before he can kind of tell Utena about those, all that fun stuff. And then Akio to Tokiko, they said at the very end of the episode that for flowers to bear fruit, they have to have their petals stricken, which ties to Tokiko making the sugar roses by preserving or plucking roses to preserve them, which is tied to Mamiya with the black roses. So the question at the end of the last episode that I posed is, Tokiko, is she going to draw a sword from Mikage and use it to fight Utena to try to kill Anthe so she can save her brother, who she'll find out is alive? And what's even crazier is Utena has no clue who this woman is, who Mamiya is, who Mikage is. She's met Mikage, but she doesn't really know the secrets behind him. So it's all just lovely. And we need more information before we can move further. So before we get to that, I want to talk about some comments from episodes 17 through 19, because we're slowly catching up with the comments, which is fun. Skep Kid in episode 17 says, a detail backing up that Shiori does know that Juri is in love with her is that when she opens the locket in the elevator, there was still water trapped in it, implying that she hadn't opened it and she just needed a reason to acknowledge something she already assumed. That's so good. I hadn't made that connection with her not opening the locket, so she already knew what was in it before she even opened it. Brilliant. Brilliant. And then I want to point out some stuff with Wakaba, but I guess we're going to go straight to that. That comment from episode 17 was from a while back. So there's been a lot of Saionji bashing, respectively and lovingly, on the channel. And so, look, I honestly, at first, the first couple episodes of Utena, I did not like Saionji at all. I thought he was an asshole. Now, as we go more and more into it, I'm like, you are just a disaster gay. You're just such a disaster. And you're just, oh my God, it's amazing. I love Saionji because he's a disaster. I want the best for him because I think he's capable and has the potential for it. He's just, when he's around toxic people, aka Toga, he falls into the most toxic patterns and it's not good. And I don't like that. So Althussy had some comments, but they posted this strip where it says, our favorite seaweed-haired garbage barge in human form duelist is back. I adore Saionji. What an absolute embarrassment of a person. What a trash excuse of a human being. Love him to death. Those are my exact thoughts. Seaweed-haired garbage barge in human form. Mwah. Beautiful. But I love this can't stop, won't stop, not sure how to stop. That describes Saionji perfectly, right? So then we were talking in the Discord and we were bringing up that I'm like, girl, Wakaba, just accept that Saionji's gay. You guys can watch rom-coms together and solve each other's relationship problems. And then Althussy said, oh, no doubt. Saionji loves rom-coms. The sappier, the better. And he definitely messy cry at every happy ending. And then Bright Girl was like, if the double denim didn't tip her off, she's never going to get it. Yes. Cheers. If the double denim don't get you, then I don't know what's going to do it for you. God, I love our Discord. I love it. I love it to pieces. But anyway, so getting back to Wakaba, Althussy said for episode 19, it's an oddly thoughtful gift, the leaf, because Wakaba means young leaf. Like, stop threatening to become an almost decent person, Saionji. It's incredibly frustrating, right? He has these moments where he does good and you're like, oh, okay, you just need to be away from toxic people. But then toxic people show up and he makes bad decisions and you're like, but Saionji, why? So, this one commenter whose name, again, I don't know if it is in Russian. I don't know. I cannot read it. But it says, I think Anthe's words in the previews are about being an adult, implying she's apparently already donated blood more than once. And Utena, of course, doesn't understand the metaphor. So, if we're donating blood, you have to be at least 17 or 18 to donate blood with consent. So that means that Anthe is much older than she says she is, which is tying to this episode. So, and she doesn't get it, right? And then Pancake for episode 19 says, this conversation between Pancake and Medley was really cool. It was, Pancake pointed out the frame on the wall in episode 19 stays a butterfly for Tatsuya, and Mikage never said go deeper because there was nothing deeper with his crush on Wakaba, which I thought was a really good thing to point out. And then Medley says, a cool detail I only recently learned is Wakaba's elevator sequence. The butterfly regression picture on the wall appears to already start at the caterpillar stage and then goes to the leaf. Aside from being the only character that's like this, it's a nice contrast to the Onion Boy, who just stays as the butterfly, which I thought was really cool because Pancake notes Mikage also doesn't say go deeper like with the Onion Boy, but this time it's because Wakaba starts at 100 and keeps going. So yeah, Wakaba and Tatsuya are total opposites, where Tatsuya just has a crush on her and there's no real deeper ulterior motive. He's just like, I kind of like her, and that's about it. Whereas Wakaba, not only is she like way deeper into this with Anthe and has been for a while, but Wakaba is a healthy enough individual to be self-aware of her feelings, and she does project them, and she has talked about them, and so now it's just snowballing insanely. Like, that's why Wakaba in episode 19 was such a threat, because I was like, oh shit, she's self-aware, she could actually be a problem. And then luckily Utena, the power of friendship is magic, pulled through, right? So then we finally have Oliver Jajado, whose comment is relating to episode 19. Tatsuya, no matter how much she's tarnished by that other guy, she'll come back to me. Love always wins in the end. Soji's like, you really are a good person. Okay, Tatsuya does come across as a bit of an entitled nice guy here, in my opinion. I would agree with that. Olivier says, interestingly, during the confessional, the butterfly doesn't regress back into a cocoon or a caterpillar, and unlike the others, Soji never tells him to go deeper, beyond his surface level emotions. I guess we can assume Tatsuya either refused to evoke any darker feelings hidden deep within him, or he doesn't possess them in the first place. Yeah, I feel like Tatsuya's love for Wakaba is very surface level. It could become something more if given the chance, but right now it's very surface level. And also, I feel like even though Tatsuya does come across as an entitled nice guy in episode 19, there is kind of I think one of the reasons too that his feelings don't get any darker is he does have faith that Wakaba will figure out Saionji's a bad guy, and he'll come back to her, and she'll come back to Tatsuya in the end. He's like, oh, well, love will win in the end. So she'll figure out Saionji's not in love with her, and she'll come back, and we can make it work. Which is what no other character in this series thinks. So that's definitely like a sign that Tatsuya is like, it is the entitled nice guy, but he is showing faith that he does believe in the process, and he believes that at the end of the day, she's going to figure things out and be like, that's an unhealthy relationship. I'm going to go back to a healthy one. And he has a lot of faith in her to do that, which is very surface level. So I thought that was really interesting. But then we point out in the episode's commentary, Ikuhara expresses a different perspective from Soji on why Tatsuya wasn't chosen by the Black Rose. Ooh, I haven't read this, y'all. So episode 19, Song of the Fallen Kingdom. Why is it that the path he must take does not lie here? In any other show, a character like him probably wouldn't have been designed to gain the audience's sympathy. However, this is Revolutionary Girl Utena and the Black Rose arc, no less. Anyone to open the door must be baptized. There are many things in this world that don't go the way you want them to. But even so, the Onion Girl's trying to be someone special. She's fighting. Isn't that exactly the story that the Black Rose arc is trying to tell? That's why there's no path here for the boy who decided to just pray for her happiness from the sidelines. In most cases, things don't go the way you want them to have been decided by a system. How should we fight when we're up against a great power, one difficult to oppose? That's why there's no path here for the boy who's quit opposing it and decided to just pray for her happiness from the sidelines. Oh, so that gives a bit of a darker connotation to it, because it's Mikage kind of being like, you have no fight in you. You're not going to fight for her. So there's no point in you becoming a duelist because you're not going to fight. You're just going to sit on the sidelines and hope things work out. That gives it a lot more of a darker, kind of cynical edge. And it's also suggesting, as we've discussed the last few episodes, that there's this possible greater power at work. And so it's the idea that how do you fight a system? Well, you figure out how to play the game and you beat them at their own game. Which, are we saying that Mikage is trying to do that now against Akio? I don't know. Is that what Utena is going to have to do, is to figure out how to play the game? Utena's kind of on the sideline. Utena at times feels like she wants to be on the sidelines and she doesn't want to fight. But this series has constantly made her fight. So that is so interesting to me. And I'm very curious to see where we're going to go with that. But we've talked for 15 minutes. We need to get on with the episode. But yeah, y'all, I don't know what episode 23 and beyond is going to give to us, but I'm ready. Maybe. We'll just have to see. So we are going to get started with episode 23 of Revolutionary Girl Utena and see what we get. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh my god. Okay, so that's good. I had to get that out of my system. Oh my god! Oh my god! Well, this just changes everything. It's no big deal. It's no big deal! It just changes everything. And my mic, hopefully, maybe if I'm shouting too much, the mic is like, girl, calm down. Oh my god. So yeah, it's fine. So, memories in the recesses of my mind. That is the name of the game. And Akio has the ability to manipulate memories. Okay, well, that's not terrifying at all. Okay, so let's establish a couple things. Let's just go ahead and establish a couple things on White Raccoon. I wrote out the lyrics to the duel before I started this because I didn't want to waste time just sitting there writing them out, because I knew I'd want to write them out because they seemed rather important. They are, as we'll see. So basically, it's down to, there is no Mamiya. Himamiya and Mamiya sound like they are the same person because, in fact, they are. And they have been this entire time. So, so Akio and Anthe. Anthe is also able to become Mamiya. Well, that's lovely. The question is, though, is Akio the prince, or is the prince Mamiya, aka Himamiya? That is the big question. Like, or are these two people just trying to tap into the power of Dios, and the power of Dios, which is this godlike power, is just able to get with anyone? There's such a big question between... I don't want to theorize too much about Akio and the power of Dios more than I already have, because I feel like I'll just be spinning in circles. I feel like that the series... We can take Mamiya out of the equation now because they are no longer... It's Anthe. It's always been Anthe the entire time. So we're down to just Akio, Anthe, and maybe the prince, unless the prince is just the power of Dios and the two of them are just trying to channel it. That is a big question. And I don't want to get too much into that because we don't know a lot about Akio. Akio's going to have to come to the forefront now because Mikage is gone. And I think Mikage, based on what they told us in this episode, is dead and has been dead and has been a ghost this entire time. And that has implications that I'm not ready for. This idea of ghosts. So... I'm terrified. Like, what is real? What is not real? What is, like, is Anthe even, based on these song lyrics, which we're going to talk about, I'm trying not to erase them with my chair. Based on these song lyrics, I'm like, is Anthe even a real being? Or is Anthe, just like Mikage, is Anthe a ghost as well? And is she going to disappear in front of Utena and be like, was never there to begin with. So, okay, let's back up a little bit. We have the rings, right? Now, the rings, as we understand, we understand them as a couple of things. They are contracts with Akio, that you're on board with his agenda. They could be deals with the devil, however we want to view them at the moment. There's all that loveliness. But then, in addition, they're also established as a sign that people are seeking eternity. And while last episode I was like, well, I feel bad because Miki and them, they didn't sign up for any of this. Well, they actually might have signed up for this. So we're going to talk about the rings in a little bit more detail. So don't you worry about that. But we're going to go back to that. But anyway, we're going to bring Mikage over here. Mikage, a.k.a. Soji, a.k.a. Nemuro, a.k.a. a ghost. Oh my god. I wasn't ready for this episode, and I didn't watch the preview for episode 24. Trust and believe. I was like, no, this is crazy. I also didn't go back to the preview for this episode in particular because I didn't think about that, so we might bring that up while we talk through it. But I want to go back to the episode 23 preview and see if it's going to tell us anything of relative importance, because what the fudge... oh, get that out of here. All right, so back to the preview. We're going to talk about this ED at the end too, because now I have ideas. I have ideas now about this ED. Don't you worry. But okay, so the preview for this episode, okay, says next episode, the qualification of duelist, Kane, Kozu, Wakaba. Who could be the puppet master pulling the strings and making them fight? Well, that is a very detailed question. I'm afraid I don't know myself. That genius high schooler from Nemuro Memorial Hall said he'd help me with anything. Mikage Soji, I guess I'll try to work up the courage to ask him. Whatever you wish, Utena. Oh, whatever you wish. Oh my god. Okay. Whatever you wish. So then there's this idea of the power of Dios to grant a wish to enable eternity for that individual. I don't know why, if Akio has all of this power, why this matters to him, unless Utena is somewhat... They need Utena to get to the prince. But it's like, well, but why? We don't know. There's something about her that's... Here's the thing about Utena. Utena received the ring as a kid. From the prince, supposedly. Now, the prince looks exactly like the prince that has been on top of the little egg this entire time. The question is said prince, is it really him? Is it Anthe? I don't think it's really Anthe, because Anthe is, then why would Akio be trying to get to the prince if Anthe is the prince? So there seems to be a separation between the prince and Anthe. That much is true. There's something there. There's some separation. Now, Anthe can become Mamiya. That was a thing. So, but I do think the prince is separate. Now, the question is, did the prince actually give the ring to Utena? Because we're going to point this out, that this memory is, as Mikage says, this is Utena's core memory, is the prince giving her the ring and also giving her the strength and motivation to keep living. What if they're all ghosts? What if they're all ghosts? What if none of them are alive? What if the reason we see none of their parents, but we see Toga and Nanamis, but what if they're all living in a ghost academy? They're all ghosts. None of them are alive. And this is all like a big existential thing. My mind can't wrap around that at the moment, so we're just going to let that theory float out in the nether sphere until we get a little bit more on Akio and this prince. Anyway, so her core memory, it's very clear that the loss of her parents, as far as we know, because Utena's, she is not a reliable narrator, and so as far as we know, as far as the show has given us, Utena her core memory is that she didn't want to live after losing her parents. She didn't see the point in life. She questioned God. So she questioned eternity, right? She questioned eternity's existence. And I think that is something that anybody that's lost a family member or lost a loved one, they do have to question, because it's like, do you believe in eternity? Do you believe in heaven? Do you believe? And that depends on your religious preferences and what you believe. Like there can be varied, understandings of that depending on who you are. And so Utena losing her parents questions, as anybody that's lost someone, being like, well, am I going to see them again? Or am I actually going to see them again? Or is this really the end? And it's all just part of our memory and part of who we are, and there's nothing beyond this. It's just our brains are so complex that they create these illusions and these memories, and am I actually going to see them again in the future, or is there a point? And she struggles with the point of why she should live, and that leads us back to, we keep going back to that flashback, the opening little story crawl, where the prince gives her motivation, being like, no, keep on living, and here's this ring, one day we'll meet again, and this will give you something to look forward to that's tangible. And so far, Utena's gone with that. But as we've gotten closer to Anthe and everything, it's gotten a little bit more complicated, because Utena's like, well, who did give me this ring? Was it Toga? Was it someone else? Was it Akio? We don't know. Like who gave her the ring? And is she being misled? Is the prince on the white horse that gave her the ring actually a prince on a white horse? Or, like Mikage's memories, is it someone else? And we're going to find out that her memories have been tampered with and they're not correct. I think we're going to find that out, that her memories have been tampered with and they're not correct, and that's going to break her. But I don't know to what end and to what result that will be. Again, episode 26 is going to be the end of the second act if we're going in a 3-act structure. That's only a couple episodes away. Usually at the end of the second act, characters are at their lowest point. I don't know how to feel about this, but I'm not liking where this is headed. Nope. We're going to round out the year in bad Utena land. I just feel it, right? But we got to get there first. Okay, so let's go into this episode. What was so crazy was the voice that was talking to Mikage. It sounded like Takiko's voice, but then it also sounded like Mamiya, but then it also sounded like Anthe. And I was like, oh no. Because it said we're down to the last black rose. As if they were limited. They all popped up in the little case one at a time. So this entire time, Anthe has been Mamiya. And has also been seeing Akio. And we're going to tie that to the song lyrics here in a bit. So that explains why Mamiya has been absent for lengthy periods of time. She's been with Mikage. And that just adds a whole nother layer of terror to this, because when she pricked her finger and Mikage sucked the blood out of her finger, and also when Mikage was messing with Mamiya, that wasn't Mamiya, that was Anthe this whole time. Also, it explains why Mamiya looked older despite the time change, because it's been Anthe this whole time and Anthe's not a kid. So in Mikage's memory, the boy was the one that he loved, which we'll touch base on here in a second. In the memory, it was him. But then when we see him in the present, it was actually Anthe the whole time. That's why he looked older. Because that was my whole thing last episode. When we talked about time getting slower, I was like, well, then why is Mamiya aging and getting bigger, but Mikage stays the same? That's because it's always been Anthe. Anthe's always been older. So her as Mamiya in his brain, he was thinking it was Mamiya, but it wasn't. It was Anthe. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Because even when Mamiya shows up with Akio at the end looking like a little kid, that's false, because that's just the memory. And then she turns back into Anthe, and I'm like, oh my God, she's a shapeshifter. She's been whatever we've wanted her to be this entire time. That's why I'm like, is Anthe even real? Is she just, and we'll talk about the song lyrics, is she just the power of Dios within her giving her a form? And once that leaves and goes to someone else, she won't exist anymore. And that's going to be Utena being like, what the fudge? So they said they're down to the last black rose. And in this whole scene, we don't see Mamiya. We just see Soji. And we see the flashbacks and him talking to Tokiko. He says, your brother is sinful. Well, that's determining that Anthe is sinful, but what it actually is let's go back. So the fire, in his memory, it was Mamiya that started the fire. But in reality, to quote Billy Joel, Mikage started the fire. It was Mikage that lit fire to the building. Mikage was the sinful one. And he's like, upon the sacrifices of those 100 duelist boys lies eternity. So he sacrificed all the duelist boys and everything. And so the moment that she was shaking in Soji's memories, when she was shaking Mikage, when she was shaking Mamiya, she was actually shaking Mikage. That was the thing. She was like, were you behind this? And he said, yes. And then he's like, why? And that's why we don't see Mamiya say anything. Because it felt so weird last episode. I'm like, why isn't Mamiya say anything? Because Mamiya's not actually in the memory. It's actually Soji that's there the whole time. He was just having this out-of-body experience, seeing himself with her, but thinking it was Mamiya. This is some messed up mind shit, let me tell you. And she's like, how could you do this? And then they're like, Tenjo Utena is strong. I sense immeasurable strength in her. And he's like, yes. And then like, hey, look, we're down to the last black rose. Like, there's a repetition. There's a cycle. There was several times in this episode, like the cycle going back like a broken record player, repeating the same thing over again. It was like that there. And then whenever Wakaba jumped on Utena's back, she's like, well, this seems familiar. Haven't we already done this? We have already done it. It's just time is in a cycle and it's terrifying. One of the biggest things that scares me the most is memories of characters being messed with, because I'm like, memory is such a fragile and important thing, and for it to be messed with in this series is terrifying. So horrifying, especially at the end where they forget Mikage altogether. We wrapped up his arc. We wrapped up that arc by being like, oh, well, he was never there. And they just never even knew about it. So it's like, now the council, so down here, the council that is trying to find the culprit, Mikage is gone. So that's out. So now they just have to get to Utena. But here's the thing. Are they even going to try to get to Utena? Are they even going to try to look for the culprit now? Because the culprit doesn't exist. So are they all going to just forget that all of this ever happened and then just move on with their lives and forget all about it? What about Toga? Is Toga going to forget? Is he going to be the one that jogs their memory? Or are they just going to forget this entire arc ever happened and just go on about their business like nothing was a problem? How long has Utena been here? That is so insane. How long has she been at this school? Oh my God, how long has she been in middle school? It's like Edward Cullen, like, how long have you been a vampire? How old are you? 17. How long have you been 17? That's like exactly what it is. But supposedly Utena has a lot of strength. Okay. That she has a lot of strength that's immeasurable. What that means, I don't know. We have not been told yet. But yeah, it's just a cycle over and over again. I can't construct a scenario where I'm assured victory. Is there no other way but to make her an ally? And so then we cut to the student council talking about making Utena an ally because they're trying to get a hold of this group making a move against them. And they're like, we should have them cooperate. And Miki's like, well, don't you hate Utena, Nanami? And Nanami's like, well, I don't like her, but this is a crisis. I'm glad that Nanami can put aside her pettiness for once to deal with this crisis. But who knows? It may not even matter next week. They may all just be like, huh, that was some weird. What were we worried about? Oh, never mind. Oh my God. The fact that Saionji's outside of all this, maybe that will bring something to play. And they're like, we should have her as an ally. And she's like, and I love that Nanami's like, I'm so admirable. She's like, oh, big brother, Nanami, will protect the student council no matter what. And then Juri's like, well, you say ally this, ally that, but we're not even allies. We're duelists. We're all against each other. We're all after our own goals, but we're working together towards that. Oh my God. Oh my God. So this episode is called The Qualifications of a Duelist, which basically explains why people would be duelists in the first place. So they're looking for Imamiya. They can't find her. And they're like, I'm out of places to look at. I love that Choo Choo looks inside the genie bottle water cup and doesn't find her. She's like, maybe I shouldn't have gotten mad at her the other day. The thing is, Utena's worried about her being mad at Anthe and influencing her. And that makes no difference. I don't think Anthe even cares, right? So, in the timeline of things, you had Utena looking for Anthe. You had that. Then you had her conversation with Mikage. And that. But I'm going to go back around to, we had Miki and Utena looking and seeing the wreckage, seeing the old hall that's like burnt up and destroyed. So that's, we're going to go back to that. So that's going to kind of like come around and make a curve. Time is making a curve and it's terrifying. So we're going to, so like they were looking for Anthe and they were looking for Anthe and Mikage is gone. But we're going to go back to that. So in between all of that, Mikage shows up with next to Utena. And I like there's a couple little subtle cues about this. Like, for example, Mikage's hair is a lot paler and almost muter. Like, he's, like, ghostly. He's also not as tall as Utena, which is interesting. And she's like, it's always one thing after another when you're friends with the likes of the Rose Bride. And then he's like, oh, well, aren't these roses great? And she's like, oh, hey, Mikage. Like, it's the most casual thing in the world. Like, oh, hey, why are you here? You never come around here. What the fudge? And he's like, the modest scent of a single blossom is nothing to scoff at. But I'm compelled by the fragrance of a bushel of roses. They create a tense aura of competition. So I'm like, Rose is creating this aura of competition. I'm sure, does that connect with the duelists? And Utena's like, yeah, that's great, thanks. Have you seen him, Amia? And he's like, who is that? The fact that he says, who is that? I was like, but you saw her talking to him, Amia, yesterday. Unless his memory, here's the thing. I feel as if Soji kept imagining Utena as Tokiko and Amia as Mamiya because he didn't want to acknowledge the fact that he was a ghost and that his life's already ended and his spirit has been on borrowed time in this ghostly academy that's like The Shining. This hotel that like keeps people's souls trapped in there. And his soul was trapped in there as well. Oh my god, along with 100 other dual souls. He didn't want to recognize that Anthe existed. So, which also kind of makes sense because he's been stuck in this same time loop for decades, right? And she's like, my classmate, she's been missing since this morning. And he's like, well, you're very, very mindful of your friends. And she's like, well, it's not really that, but... And he's like, did you consider my offer? And she's like, what offer? So then he talks about going to the seminar. And that's when he says to her, what does he say to her exactly? He's like, I find myself drawn to you, and if possible, I want to be with you. And she's like, oh, so that's what it is. I like at first, she's like, why would you want me to come to your seminar? I don't seem like your type of student. And then he just flat out is like, I want to date you. And she's like, oh, okay, no. And she just completely ignores the offer. She's just like, no, not interested. I'm like, of course, Utena's like, I'm not interested in a man. Sorry. No, thank you. I like that their back is also turned this entire time to us. And it also, the pink hair from both of them, the way that kind of comes down in a similar way, shows that they are quite similar. Despite Utena believing they're not the same, they are quite similar. It's kind of terrifying. And she's like, he's pretty bold. And I'm like, well, you're pretty bold too. So you guys aren't that different. And he's like, well, you could just visit too. And, you know, if you decide to become our ally, then, you know, we'll do whatever we can about whatever troubles you. And she's like, well, and then it repeats. The same frame repeats. This show is messing with my memory. Damn it, show. It repeated the same frames again and again. And I don't think it's not a decision to be cheap from the studio. They're doing it intentionally to mess with you. And then, of course, like the picture frame that we come down at the shot of the window as we come down, we see all the people like in the shadows gathered there. It's like a cross both times. Son of a bitch. She's like, I don't feel troubled, so I'm not looking for help. And she's like, if I brought Choo Choo with me. And when he slowly, like the both times that Mikage slowly turned to look at her, she looked like Takiko to him. I'm like, that was the creepiest shit ever. She's like, I couldn't bring him. Like, he's a ghost, and his whole memory is just influenced by his past. And he's like, well, it doesn't need to be you specifically. Do you have any troubled friends? He's like, I don't have to help you, but don't you have any friends who are in trouble? And she's like, troubled friends? And then, she thinks about that. And so she thinks about herself. She goes back to her troubled friends, and she's like, don't open the casket. The coffin was meant for me. Again, we have these, and again, the shot of the cross from atop the church is the same way. The cross is positioned in the same way. It looks kind of like this on the frame, and it's the same as it was with the shot of the windows and the students in the school. So what the fudge show? What's happening? And she's like, why do we keep on living when we're all going to die someday? Why did I never notice that before? There's no such thing as eternity, is there? But then when she wakes up, so she wakes up after this conversation with Himamiya, and they're at the table there. So she has the conversation with Mikage. She has the flashback to the coffin and her childhood. And then she wakes up at her house, or at her dorm, with Anthe. And that's where, so then it's like, okay, well, did this scene of Miki and them then go back to the flashback of that and all come full circle? And she ended up like having the flashback, and then it's like it's a damn time loop. Oh my God. I do love that image. And then the TV is like on static, like it's not on an appropriate channel. I do love the scene where she wakes up and she like has Anthe's hand over hers. And she's like, Himamiya. And then she has this moment where their arms like touch and she loses her hand. So I'm like, what is that? What is that memory? And then she grabs her hand and she says, is there really no way you can just up and stop being the Rose Bride? And we don't get an answer. And it's the two of them holding hands. It's probably going to be the thumbnail is going to be the two of them holding hands, looking like they do in the OP with the roses. Mm-hmm. Also, now I'm wondering in the ED if Utena and the Prince is really just Utena with the power of Dios and Anthe with the power of Dios, and that's how they're both connected through that. Because it seems like that, and then like the way they're positioned here almost looks like an infinity sign. Like, have they been reliving these moments together over and over again? This show's making me doubt everything about the whole series, about everything. I just need more information, but the show is making me call every single moment into question that we've been leading up to this. And I'm like, oh my God. And then she's like a troubled friend. Well, Anthe is her troubled friend because she feels like Anthe isn't able to be herself and she's being forced to be the Rose Bride. And she's like, I kind of want to help her out. So again, we have the moment of her walking down and then she's looking for Mikage. Meanwhile, okay, so when Anthe said, I'm so sleepy, and we see Choo-Choo there eating the noodles and everything that have fallen over, I thought in the moment that Anthe was being, like, given injections, like Mamiya had been in the flashback to fall asleep, which, who knows? Maybe she has been. Or maybe because she was working overtime, being in both Utena's mind and Mikage's mind, she was working overtime, and maybe it's because of her going back and forth, transforming into Mamiya and back into herself that made her sleepy. Who knows? It just seemed like a big coincidence, right? She's like, why have I been so sleepy as of late? Well, probably because you're doing overtime being in multiple places at once, right? We don't know for sure yet, but yeah. So then we go back to Mikage's office, and he looks at the door, and it says there's a visitor in the hall, and it looks like, who it looks like in that moment is Tokiko at the doorway, like she's got her suitcase and like she's leaving. But we don't get to see her close up, but we think it's Tokiko, and she says there's a visitor in the entrance hall. Now, if Mikage is a ghost, which we find out he is, basically in this episode, since he's a ghost, all of this makes sense in his mind that Tokiko is leaving and Utena's coming in because they're not at the same place at the same time. and that she would tell him about this. And he's like, well, thank you. I'll be there shortly. So then there's this conversation, right? And it just happens very quickly. Like, it's very Neon Genesis, very Shining, very like Stanley Kubrick. You're like, you're not supposed to pay attention to it, but you are supposed to pay attention to it. And she's like, I have a car waiting for me, so I'll be going now. Like, she's leaving. Like, she came to see her son, to see her brother's grave, and stopped by the school and saw Akio and was like, I just saw Mikage, what's going on? And he's like, yeah, time stopped for all this, and all this is going on. She's like, okay, bye. So that was creepy. But yeah, I'll have a car waiting for me, so I'll be going now. And he says, thank you for your work. And she says, telling me to get out so abruptly was so like you to the last. That's exactly how it was when we met. Completely out of the blue, you said, be my secretary. But it's fine. I can let my hair down now that I'm free from your chains. So I don't know if this is Tokiko or if it's someone else. And she's just like, yeah, you made me your secretary and now you're letting me go. And I'm free from this prison, this hell. She's like, I wonder what you even thought of me. But that makes it sound like it's Tokiko. And he says, you are who you are. And she said, you really are some kind of special person. Maybe one of the chosen. So that idea of him being one of the chosen and being special, we tied that back to Wakaba saying that she was mad that she wasn't one of the chosen. She wasn't a special person, and she lamented it, right? She was unhappy about it. But Utena was also one of the chosen too. But with Utena, everybody's like, well, you should be in a relationship with a guy. And she's like, actually, I like, Anthe. So with him, she says, but the one I fell in love with wasn't a boy younger than me like you. The moment that she said that, I was like, well, that just confirms everything. It's like his subconscious is playing her leaving and going over everything for us, the audience, because it's the last episode we're going to have Mikage, so we got to tie some things together. So it seems like it basically was saying that he fell for Tokiko's brother and not really her, right? And then he says, I am who I am. So it's like he basically admits it. He's like, yeah, I was chasing after Tokiko, but I actually fell in love with the brother. And it's just silent after that. He says, you are who you are, I am who I am. And that's just how it is. And they just sit in silence, like just confirmation. And then she says goodbye. And that's it. So then, if you notice, like, the books are out of the boxes now. Then we go to the hallway. And this definitely felt like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I wonder if Ikuhara has seen The Shining. Because in that movie, Shining's one of my favorite movies. And in that one, there's a concept of ghosts and memories and time. And the hotel that it takes place in is basically like this hell, essentially. But in there's all these photographs. And in all these photographs, they're all in black and white, and they're all of former residents who keep showing up in the hotel, which makes you realize they're all ghosts, right? So you had the people there. Then you had Mikage with his plans for the hall, right? Then you had... Now, in the picture on the wall there was Tokiko with the brother, and in the moment, for a split second, I was like, that doesn't look like Mamiya, because it wasn't. But his memory's been tampered with. So then there's that. And I like that Utena is constantly, again, now the show keeps repeating motions. And at first I just thought it was a budget thing. Like, oh, they're just going to make her do the same thing over again. That's funny because they have the stock footage. Now it's like we're tampering with your memory. She keeps doing the same stretches, the same poses. And then when you look at all these photos now on the wall, it's like they insert all these pictures of like Japanese people. And I'm assuming they're the mangaka and the creator and everything. They're just random photos there now. Ridiculous. Is that like Ano and Ikuhara there? Okay, so she goes past him. That's not Tokiko. That's not the same woman before. It's just his secretary, and she leaves. Was she a ghost too? Who even knows? Who even knows? But then we have different photos. So we have them standing there, like images from the last episode. We have the table and everything. We have the stills, the screenshots. And then we see Kane. And then Utena's like, wait a minute, who was taking photographs in the dueling arena? And it's like, I was taking these photographs. How did this happen? Who took these? And she's like, what the fudge? And yeah, exactly. Like, that's the horror element. Like, who took these photos? How did they get here? And she's like, what is this? And then that's when Mikage shows up. Oh my god. In the hall, this ghostly hall of illusions. And maybe it's just supposed to be an illusion. So then we have this table. This never-ending table, right? But not only the table, it's also like the, and my dogs are probably freaking out because of a deer or something. It's also like a covered casket. The one that Mikage, as we find out, was wheeling through the hall. We find out Mikage, like all the memories of Mikage watching someone that we never got to see their face, watching them wheel the caskets to the basement. That was Mikage the whole time. He just was seeing it like out of body and wasn't connecting that it was him doing it. The whole time. The whole time. So, yeah. Yep. But then we have the voices of the duelist boys that died. And the little candle there that says the path to the dueling arena is now open. At last, it is about to begin. And there's at the center of it is the candelabra that started the whole fire that lit the place ablaze and killed them to begin with. Then there's the fruit in the basket, right? That bearing fruit. So we talked the last episode, Akio said that to bear fruit, you had to pluck the petals. So to bear fruit, here we are. With this, Professor Nero's job is finished. That should have been a sign that Nemuro, this was the end of him. Like, us getting him to the arena and connecting all of this, his job is done. From now on, carrying on without him, and there's all these dishes, is probably what you know who is planning. So basically, this entire conversation they're having is saying that Akio is done with Mikage. Now, why he was using him all this time to begin with, I don't know. We don't know for sure. Like, what was his point? What was his purpose? Why was he just trying to find people like Utena? It's probably what he's planning. And it's like the clean dishes. Surely even he will lose to someone. Which is wondering, like, that puts into perspective, does that mean that Akio is the final boss? Or is he another pawn as well? Is this just an endless cycle, right? And then there's the dishes on the table. And then we can just leave him by the wayside. And the clear glasses. And they're like, now let's open the champagne. So then it's like, so they're like, you know what? Mikage's done his job. Now we can rest in peace because he's gonna be done here soon. So we've done everything. Then we go to this one moment. This feels like a Renaissance painting, and I can't place it. But the bed curtains and everything, and the fact that Nemuro he's there in his old gear and everything, it feels like a flashback. And it feels like something from before the place lit on fire, but I don't understand. And then Mamiya shows up with roses of 3 colors. They're white, they're yellow, and they're red. So that looks like a fire to me. So is it representative of the fire that he's going to start for Mamiya? Is it a representative of that? Do the red roses and the yellow roses and the white roses? I mean, we've associated red with Akio and Toga. We've associated yellow with Nanami. We've associated white with Anthy and Utena. So I don't know the significance of the 3 colored roses yet, but there seems to be some. And he says how selfish they are. It's because of you the castle appeared and the path to the arena opened, is it not? So that means to say that Mikage, him being there, and his essence is the one that created the castle. That created the castle and the path to the arena. So was Mikage's sacrifice how all of this came to be? If Mikage's gone, is that going to lead to the OP where the castle and everything gets destroyed? How does that work? And then from there, Mamiya looks over and says, they're all afraid of you. They think you may be able to attain eternity. And he's like, I'm not going to duel or anything of the sort. And they're like, why not? Do you not want to take into those hands the power to revolutionize the world? So they're afraid you're going to duel, but why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want that power? And then Mikage says, he like opens his eyes and he's like, even though eternity exists in that castle. So the castle still is said to have eternity stuck within it. That's what we're trying to get to, right? But we also have the roses hiding Mamiya's face. And then we have the fire and everything. So was that before? So did this all happen before the fire that destroyed everything? Is that what this was? So before they lit fire to everything, was that conversation between Anthe and Mikage what was going on? I don't know. Now that Mikage is gone, I wonder if that is going to affect the castle and how that's going to work. Eternity means to last forever. And then we see the flame, right? The candelabra. And we think that it's Mamiya holding it, but it's actually Soji. And they're like, for years, decades, centuries, millennia, tens of thousands, hundreds of millions, billions of cycles, and billions of years, my life may be nothing but an instant. But eternity means this moment lasts for billions of years. Oh my God, and even then it does not end. That's terrifying. So meaning that everything he's created is going to live on without him, which, I mean, that's, people's legacies last beyond and beyond until they're forgotten by people. That's the thing. As long as people keep talking about it and it's known, that memory won't die out. But the moment people stop talking about it, that's when it will end. So, oh my God. We're going to go to the song lyrics. Don't you worry. And that's when he's like, I want eternity. And as he keeps saying that, the roses get higher and higher, covering Mamiya's face. Oh my God. Yeah. And that's when he shows up in front of Takiko, saying, this is the first step in what you're advancing to opening the path to eternity from this academy. And now I too wish to attain eternity. He got sucked in. He got sucked into all of this and got convinced that he too needed eternity. And he was used by Akio and the power of Dios. And here we are. I love the portraits on the wall are still the pictures of the staff and crew, which is insane to me. And so then we see the picture of him. And he's like, you returned. He's like, I knew you would come back to me sooner or later. And when he slowly turns and smiles, and it's supposed to be Takiko, I'm like, it's like Anthe's fourth wall breaking smile at the end, like, gotcha, bitch, it's been me all along. And I'm like, what the fudge? Yeah, no. It's like, you don't have to regret abandoning me. And Utena's like, I'm not regretting abandoning you, and also, what? So then she's like, are you the one pulling the strings? And he does say no. It's not him pulling the strings. He's as much of a pawn as any of these people are. He's like, they were just part of the seminar. Each one of these girls had unforgettable memories, precious memories, and they sallied forth and fought to protect those memories. They are people who try to change their lives using those memories. So it's the idea of memories and protecting them and fighting to change using those memories. Using the past to influence and change your future is essentially it. Which is kind of terrifying because at the end of all the duels, they forgot why they got there and what they were there for. So their memories were altered, and it's almost like the price they paid for trying to tap in their memories and use them is that they lose them. I don't want Utena to lose her memories of Anthe, and I want her and Anthe to end up together. So Sho, why are you making me worry so much? Ah! And she's like, memories. And then he's like, well, what about you? And then she has the memory of her prince. She's like, we'll meet again, and until then I won't cry, and I'll be patient no matter what. And that's when he's like, that memory, knowing your potential, you are able to make that memory eternal as I did. The world requires it. And as he's about to say, a path has been prepared for you, she's like, fuck no, screw you. No. So he suggests that her memory keeps her going. that her memory, she's made that eternal, and that allows her to be a duelist. She's just like Mickey, Jury, Toga, the others who... Now, Toga is the big curious one, because Toga, we didn't really get to see what his memory was and why he was pushed to do all of that. We don't really know from Toga, except that he wants to unlock the secrets, right? But the others, it's all like, yeah, because she's like, you know, who the hell is the world? I love that she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're a manipulative little bastard. And he's like, you seem to be yelling out, don't touch my precious memory. Which now is like, knowing he's a ghost, is like, he's just like, you know, you're kind of in the same boat as me. He's like, you have this memory and it's the only thing holding you together and you don't want me to tamper with it. When Toga tampered with it, that led you to doubt yourself and it led to all this crazy stuff happening. He's like, you don't want me to tamper with it. I'm like, is Utena a ghost just like him? I don't know what to do with that. And he's like, that memory is a soul thing sustaining you all this time. Which is actually what the case is with him. So when she sees they both have those rings, she's like, maybe we are similar. The memory you possess is a worthy one. Only those who hold beautiful memories are allowed to wish for eternity, are allowed to wish for those days to last forever, just like you were back then. And that's why you and I are the same. You have the same eyes as someone who will not stop wishing to turn memories into something eternal. And that's the thing. I feel like Utena is kind of at that point where she is trying to hold on to that memory of the past, and it is defining who she is, and she does want to make it eternal because it keeps her going. But at the same time, she believes in Anthe and wants to believe in Anthe, who is right in front of her, seemingly, and wants to make that part of her eternity. Like her eternity, I feel like for Miki and Jury and the others, the thing is their memories are their eternity and they keep wanting to go back to the past. They can't move forward. That's why they're in this time loop. They can't move beyond the past that was good to an uncertain or undesirable present or future. So they keep trying to hold on to those eternal memories and make that a reality, which is this whole time loop. But for Utena, her past was bad. It wasn't good. But finding the prince gave her hope. So now, though, since she's had to question who that prince is it Toga? Is it Akio? What is happening? She's found a way in the present to find someone that fits that role for her that she wants to make eternal in the present, which is Anthe. And of course, now that we know what we know about Anthe, that's going to make this all very complicated. So I'm like, what the fudge? And she, you know, she challenges him. For the first time, Utena challenges him to a duel and is like, I'm going to beat you to a pulp and I'm nothing like you. So then we leave Mikage in the elevator. The butterfly's already at the pupil or caterpillar stage. He's not even on the bench. He's up against the wall. She punched him in the face, so I don't know why he's grabbing his shoulder, except maybe he fell that way and he hurt his shoulder by which he fell. And also, Mamiya was in the shadows this whole time, which probably means that it was Anthe the whole time. And as it goes down there, he like talks about seeing, they're like, Senpai, why did you call her here? Why are you silent? What's so funny? And when he sees the tear, I thought the tear was, you know, because he's talked about being a robot last week and how he didn't have any emotions or feeling. And now he's like, look, because I was in pain, I shed a tear. It's like, also, Utena can punch ghosts. We should establish that that is not helping my theory that they're all dead and trapped in this academy. Not good. Is this like, I don't know if you all have read, the Chronicles of Narnia before. I remember when The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe came out, and I remember going to book fair, which is a thing in America where you go get books when you were a kid in grade school. And I saw like the series of the Chronicles of Narnia, which has a lot of ties to like God and heaven and this other fantasy world that's linked with heaven, as you find out in the story. There are like 7 books, and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is actually the 3rd book in the series, but most people just know about that one. They're all connected, but they're all like separate stories that kind of feed into each other. So you can read them out of order if you want, but then if you go read them in chronological order, it'll make a lot more sense. And you'll be like, oh, well, After The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I bought the book The Last Battle, which had a unicorn on it, and I was like, oh, I love unicorns, let's get that. That's the last book in the series! And so I went from the third book to the last book, and I was like, oh, which some of the characters are still in it, so you're like, oh, it's just a continuation. No. So these are spoilers for The Last Battle in the Chronicles of Narnia for the next, 30 seconds or a minute, so just, I'll wave my hand when I'm done talking about that. In The Last Battle, these kids go to this fantasy world that's in the middle of a war, and they get to battling and doing all of this stuff. And at the end of the book, Aslan, who is a representative figure of Jesus, basically, comes to them and says, yeah, that train you were on at the beginning of the story, well, actually it crashed and you all have been dead this whole time. So we're actually on our way to heaven, but you came by here to this limbo to kind of help out before you move on. And I was like, what? So that's end of Narnia spoilers, but that's how I felt in this episode. I'm like, is she dead? Is anyone alive? Is this all The Shining? Are they trapped in this hotel of hell and we're not getting out? I'm like, show, I need some concrete answers, and you gave me none of those this episode at all. I don't think that Utena would have killed Mikage, if I'm being honest. I don't think that would have happened. And that's when the voice says, you sound like you're enjoying this. She keeps hurting and surprising me. And then I thought Takiko has returned to settle the score with me. At that point, I was like, oh, Mikage's lost it, because Utena is not Takiko. He's just lost it in its memory. And then we see Mamiya in his mind being like, are you going to duel her? And that's when Mikage says, well, after all, we haven't made any progress in all this time. But she's closer to the power of Dios than either of us. We need to defeat her if we are to proceed. So at this point, though, and then you have Anthe holding the rose, and the rose slowly drops, which is exactly like Akio in the previous episode with the rose slowly dropping. So I'm like, is Anthe just an offshoot of Akio? Are they the same being? Are they different? Is the prince different? Are they all the same? Who knows? But what that tells me is that they have been using Mikage's soul and the souls of all the people he sacrificed to keep whatever's happening at this school going on for however many decades it's been going on. They've been using their souls to fuel whatever they're doing, and that's terrifying. And then, yeah, the rose, but it looks like his hand lifts the rose to himself, so he's had the rose the whole time? The fudge? A rose in majestic full bloom at the end of the world is bestowed upon me. So I like that we don't have the lead up to her getting to the top of the dueling Coliseum, because the dueling platform, because she's the one that challenged him to a duel. So that makes sense now. She's not going to duel him. He's going to duel her. So Utena's looking at the ring going, okay, I don't know what to make about all this. This is weird. And then Wakaba jumps on her. She's like, your eyes are the same as the eyes of someone who will not stop wishing to turn memories into something eternal. So then Wakaba nearly knocks her out the window, which has happened before. So it's another time loop. And she's like, are you forgetting your best friend Wakaba these days? She's like, I haven't. No matter what happens, I'm always on your side. And that's when we have the Shadow Girls come in, right? So the Shadow Girls message seems to be that you have the dad who's like, well, I was class rep back in my day, top of my class. I was, your pa was a class rep. I was top of the game. But now in the present, he's not top of his game anymore. He's kind of chopped liver. He's old news. So he wants to keep returning to the glory days of old to reclaim that lost luster, which sounds a lot like Mikage. Mikage was at the top of his game, but then everything fell apart, and now he's been clinging to the past, clinging to those dying embers to try to regain that sense of when things were good. And you could say that's the same for all of them. They all have memories in the past. Well, except for Utena. Utena's memories in the past weren't great. It's just the prince was her salvation. But Miki and Juri and Saionji and Toga have memories of the past they're all clinging to, trying to keep those good memories alive, right? But then we have the portrait. Oh my god. Everything about this duel was amazing. The portrait changing, the moment he realizes that his memories have all been altered. All of it. This duel was my favorite out of all the duels. I loved this. It was such a twist. Such a revelation. So yeah, so she gets the sword to revolutionize the world. And then we start our lyrics, right? Okay. So let's start with these song lyrics. I've printed them out here so that you all can see them. The first lines are, there's a couple repetitions throughout this, so let's just, we're just gonna put this over here, and I'm gonna back up and kind of talk you all through it. So we have darkness and incandescence. Now, incandescence is the light and heat that combines sometimes from meteors or comets. Otherworldly things. So yes, and then we have creation and puppets. And then we have the theocentrism. Now, theocentrism is the name, is the lyric. And theocentrism is the idea that God is the central aspect of existence and a focal point. Basically, that thoughts, interests, and feelings, we are all stewards of his creation. God created all this. We are just living by his will, right? So I feel like the theocentrism that is advocated by the characters in the story is sometimes counterbalanced by the lyrics that talk about evolution and just the biological reconstruction and evolution of mankind into who they are today, and we're labeling it as a form of God. Again, depends on your religion, depends on how you believe in that. It's just interesting that it's brought out in this, right? And so just the whole duel between them is amazing. I love the animation, the action, it was so good. So then, and as they spiral towards it, a single being pulls all the strings. So I'm going to go over these song lyrics here in a second, but he's like, I'm not back to normal yet since you hurt my shoulder. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I don't think I'm going to lose to you. And she's like, I'm not losing some bastard pulling the strings from the shadow. And he's like, well, that's not accurate. I'm not actually doing that. Those who receive my black roses approached me of their own free will. They stood here of their own free will. And all who stand here are the same as me. They come here drawn by eternity. And she's like, don't put the blame on them for what you did. Now, I think that both Utena and Mikage are right. Because Utena is saying, like, you know, you did manipulate some of this stuff. Like, the whole thing with the golden leaf and Wakaba. You took that from Saionji, gave it to Anthe, which, oh my god, gave it to Anthe. What if he gave it to Mamiya, thinking it was Mamiya? Did he plan that? Did he know he was giving it to Anthe? Oh, shit. But then they did take the locket. They did do these other things. Like he set up the situations, which is true on Utena's part. But to Mikage's point, they did decide to go see him after it. They did let it get to him. So both Utena and Mikage are kind of right in terms of that. They are, you know, he's to blame and he's not to blame. He's just a ghost after all. Although he can't chop her hair. And then he keeps thinking that she's Tokiko. You met someone important to you long ago, right? And that person changed your life, right? Which is very true. It's the prince. The prince changed her life. And you stand here because of the strength of that illusion. That's why you're able to become a duelist. Am I wrong? You and I are the same. So he's thinking that she's Tokiko, and he's thinking that she's talking about, you know, Akio, because her and Akio were making out. Tokiko and him were in the flashback. So he's like, you know, you keep wanting to come back here because of your relationship with Akio. And it's like, he's like over here at this point. But Utena, she was able to enter the dueling arena because of her memory of the prince. That memory was so strong, she wants to kind of eternalize it because that's helped define who she is. And he's like, right here and right now, you're going to lose to Kiko. I like that she's like, what? Also, her hand looks bruised holding that sword, which is interesting. Like, it's showing the strain. I just noticed that on her hand as she's fighting him. And she's like, I'm not losing to you. I'm surprised she doesn't, like, talk to him about not being to Kiko. But I think at this point, she's just like, you're crazy, so whatever. And that's when Anthe says, Master Utena, come back to me. Now, at this point, when Anthe gets Utena and they're going to do the sword thing to call down the prince, Mikage gets a voice in his head that says, you're going to lose. And Utena's going to win. Now, at this point, that is Anthe projecting Mamiya's voice into Mikage's head, right? Or Mikage's just realizing it and using Mamiya's voice for it. We don't know for sure. But, one, is Mamiya and Anthe, are they may be the same being, but do they share, is there like a split personality thing going on? Is there something with that? We don't know. Does Anthe... My fear is, as a watcher, my fear is that Anthe doesn't actually like Utena. And this is all part of her and Akio, like, messing with all of them. The last thing I want is for Anthe to not actually like Utena, and for Utena's love and her love to be false. And I don't think that that's how it's going to end up. I think she is in love with Utena and vice versa. But I think that Akio is going to try to convince Utena that this has all been a lie, and Utena doesn't care for her. I think that's how episode 26 is going to end when we're at the end of Act 2, that he's going to try to convince Utena that Anthe has been lying to her the whole time and doesn't actually like her, is what I think it's going to happen. That's how I think it's going to go, and I'm going to be heartbroken. But I want it to be that Anthe does actually like Utena and has fallen in love with her. And then she's like, she's going to strike the rose from your trust. And then he's like, where are you, Mamiya? And that's when he looks over. And the moment he looks at the photo and sees the boy with the freckles and the green eyes, that's actually him and not Mamiya, that part blew my mind. Blew my mind. And he's like, you can't defeat her. You'll never defeat the sister of mine within your memory. Not for all eternity. And that's the thing. Because he's like, you can't defeat Takiko because she's just in your memory. You're going to think about her forever and it's not going to matter because that's not who she really is. You're already gone. You are already an eternal spirit. You're going to be haunted by that for the rest of your existence. Oh my God. Oh my God. So yeah. And then eternity is before my eyes. I'm going to defeat you and grasp the power to change the world. And that's when Anthe says, look, senpai, he's like, I took it as your burden, even your brother's sin. And when she slaps it, when he says, even your brother's sin, and she smacks him, like her recognizing the brother is dead, but Mikage can't accept it. And so he forged this entire scenario to cover up the fact that the brother was dead, the boy that he loved was dead. And then she smacks him, and we come to realize, and Anthe is telling him, look, senpai, watch carefully. At the time, at that place, who was truly there and who wasn't there? Who truly set fire to the building? And Mikage realizes that, no, it's been him all along that killed all the people and set fire to the building. And he's like, Mamiya, it's been such a long time. How many decades has it been since I last saw you? And then all the pictures fall over. And it all hit. So then we cut back to the table. There are now pink roses on top of it, which is ominous. And yeah, Mamiya is sitting there. Mamiya is standing there. I thought it was Akio in the reaction, but it's Mamiya. And Akio's like, oh, yeah. Oh, hey, Nemuro-kun. Thanks for calling. Glad your ghost dropped in. I was thinking a call from you was due. Yeah, the boy that you called Mamiya, you kept by your side owing to your regrets over Takiko. He died a long time ago. That was terrifying. He just said it like it was nothing. Yep. And then he says, I exploited the illusory memories which you held so dear as to halt your own time. So it's possible that Akio is manipulating all of these people in the student council and everything and exploiting their memories to keep them alive to fuel his own whatever agenda. That's terrifying to me. Yeah. Yeah. Nope. Because then she defeats him. The time you spent restraining your own potential, never quite reaching adulthood, was useful. They're using the youth of children. It's like hocus pocus. They're stealing the lives out of all the children of Otaria Academy and using it for their own agendas. No! Yeah, how is it useful? Explain. But now we've used it all up. From this point forward, no path has been prepared for you. And then he says, I'd very much like it for you to graduate. That's basically like you just took old Yeller out and shot him. You're like, time for you to go. We're done with you now. The fudge. And yeah, then we go back to this moment and it's just a ruin But like everything, like she doesn't remember dueling him anymore. And they're like, oh, we got to this weird place. And they're like, there's no casualties. But what was that building called? And yeah, then they're like, well, it appeared there was no casualties. I'm like, what about the 100 that died? What about Mikage? What about Mamiya? Yeah, and they can't remember what it's called. And he's like, that sounds wrong. And she keeps looking for Mamiya. And then Miki says, I hate it when I can't remember something. Are they all going to forget each other over the course of this series? No. Oh my God. Nope. And then Akio says, oh, what's the matter? Are you sympathizing with him? Yeah. And then he's like, oh, well, because he puts his hand on Anthony's shoulder and says he already no longer exists in this academy. No, he never did in the first place. He's a freaking ghost. Nope. And he says, the same as you. And then we go back and we see Anthony look back at him and smile. And she gives us that little fourth wall breaking smile to the camera. So, by she never existed in this academy, is he talking about her as Mamiya never existed? Or is Anthony a spirit as well and is not actually there either? Because here's the song lyrics. Now that we can go back to them and talk about them. Here are the song lyrics. So, darkness and incandescence, creation and puppets. Theocentrism is the name. And then a single being pulls all the strings. Everyone else is merely imaginary puppets. So, that's this idea. Let's see those here. That's the idea here that Akio, the idea is that Akio is pulling the strings and all the other duelists and stuff are all just puppets. But also, are they imaginary? Are they actually really there? Are they like Mikage and their ghosts? Is this all in Utena's head? Then it says darkness, frigidity, which is like being frozen in the darkness. Creation and organisms, which is just in general. Theocentrism is the link. So how do we link together this concept of a deity, this concept that this one being is routing everything else? Why do we use that as a link for our own purpose, right? Upon nature is the link upon nature's stage, the original agent. So it says on nature's stage, like as the world's put in front of us, we have to believe that someone is pulling the strings because otherwise everything around us, our entire identity and sense of being falls apart, right? So the original agent is the imaginary art of life creation. And to me, that's signified that like we have this idea. It felt very atheist, these lyrics, because it's the idea that we create a God to give us purpose and believe there's something after death. But the reality is the imaginary art of life creation is like, no, evolution's just made us exist. And this is how it works. And it's complex and we can't understand it. So we make up ways to understand it. But then it's like the chicken and the egg. It's like, but then how did this process and how did this happen? So it's very interesting. And then it says words, births, encounters, and meandering. Wisdom, births, encounters, and voids. So it's kind of like, you know, words, we kind of meander around our words. We don't actually say what we mean. And so that leads us to just being in this cycle. And wisdom and voids, you know, our memories are tied to our knowledge. And without that memory, we don't have that knowledge. So it leads to this void in our consciousness. And then, where and when am I? We don't know because decades have passed for Mikage and he was stuck in this route and now that's gone and it's totally shifted to something else. So we don't know. We don't know. And it says incantations, charms, mysteries, prayers, me. It's like, how are we being bewitched in this world? Right? Stage, destiny, magic, a mirror. The mirror shows a reflection of who we are on the inside and actually are. And we're all on this stage at this academy. And there is destiny of Anthony and Utena. But is it magic? Is it not? How does all this work? And then it says full moon. It's repeated twice. Full moon, mysterious transformations. So we know that once a month or once a week, Anthony goes to see Akio. And we know, I'm like, is this like a berserk scenario where people are transforming under the full moon? Is that what this is? So I feel like Anthe's the one that we've seen transform into Mamiya, into someone else that she's not really. Right? Why can she transform? That means that she's not human. So what does that mean? If she's not human, what is she? Is she just an illusion? Is she real? I don't know. And then it says, I am an imaginary life form coming to my end. Now the question is the imaginary life form coming to my end? Is that talking about Mikage? Was Mikage an imaginary life form coming to their end? Or is this Anthe? Is this Anthe? And then it says, I'm an imaginary fate form coming to an end. So I was like, what the heck is a fate form? A fate form, it says, what is a fate form? Somebody talks about Gilgamesh, which is interesting. What does the Gilgamesh say? It's talking about a Grand Order game, so I don't know if that's actually something different, but I don't think that it is. I think fate form, if we're talking about a fate form, I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. Or if it means a perfect form, maybe. I am an imaginary perfect form coming to my end. Is Anthe a deity? We don't know. And then wishing for time and never resting. So Anthe talks about being sleepy as of late. But I feel like these lyrics could apply to Anthe as well as Mikage, because it says these are both talking about Mikage coming to their end, but also could be talking about like wishing for time and never resting. Well, that's Mikage in this story, and it's just like on an infinite time loop. And then Anthe, though, has talked about resting, so maybe they define this and says living on as a hollow form. Well, that defines Mikage a bit, but also Anthe as well, because Anthe's not allowed to have her own thoughts and opinions about things. And then says wishing for soil, armless, legless. So maybe it's Mikage wishing for death and just to stop existing anymore. And it says, I continue to exist, transparent, intangible, nothing but a faint sigh. Which I think can apply to Mikage as well as Anthe. Oh my god. I want Anthe to be real, and I want the love between her and Utena to be real, but this episode has made me question everything. And I'm not going to watch the preview, because I'm going to want to find out next week. So, y'all! So, I know it's going to be very, very difficult for you not to spoil me. It's going to be very difficult to comment below without spoiling, but maybe y'all can just talk about your feelings about this episode when you first watched it. Like, were you freaked out like I am? So, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back very soon with more Revolutionary Girl Utena